let me just say that back in January, I stumbled across Dr. Cochran's book, The Doctor Crisis, and I was so impressed with it that when we had our board meeting in January, I suggested that we all read the book and see if we could locate Dr. Cochran and ask him to lead a discussion with us. He's graciously agreed to do that, and Dr. Amy Crawford has agreed to be the kind of facilitator of the conversation. And so, Dr. Crawford, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Sounds wonderful. Hello, everybody. So
hello.
Jack Cochran, hello, he and I had a wonderful conversation yesterday because I really wanted to glean some pithy and apropos remarks to introduce him to you for this conversation. So I have a little bit of background that's not on the inside cover of his book. So he is a native Coloradan who started out in dental school and hated it, and then went to medical school and loved it, and then originally actually trained in ENT, at which point we both shared our mutual dislike for copious mucus. So he then went on and did facial plastics and really developed a love for reconstructive surgery in pediatrics. So did that training, came back to Denver, where he started out in an established and respected private practice in Denver, and that was kind of where he planned to be. So at this point, I'm thinking, well, I'm so curious to know what makes someone who thinks he's going to be an excellent clinician end up doing something much, much different. And so, what is it that makes you, you? And so then he told me a little bit more about how things progressed. So he's working at this private practice in Denver, and the first wave of managed care or managed, money came into being in the 80s, and found that his practice was really needing to do more and more facelifts in order to cover the compensation for the reconstructive cleft surgeries that he really wanted to be doing. So then this newcomer on the block, Kaiser Permanente, kind of popped up, and he really liked their philosophy in terms of integrating their care and in-house care. So he had conversations with them for over the course of about 18 months, and then really needed to make a decision and decided to go with them when they internalized their plastic surgery department. And he's been with them since then. And I think this is fascinating. I'm always wondering if people have this timeline in their heads of what it is they want to do. So again, he just thought he'd be an excellent clinician, but something happened along the way. So we had talked about if he could identify, looking backwards, were there intrinsic traits in his personality or in his background that contributed to this change. So the points that he came up with, which I thought were intriguing, because maybe we can find them in other people around us, is that he decided that he is not, or realized that he is not change averse, which is huge, that you're not so set in your ways. He identified a certain restlessness of his character that allowed him to be open to different opportunities as they arose. He realized that what he had defined initially as a responsibility to the one patient in front of him could maybe develop into responsibility and the ability to help many, many, many patients and many, many, many doctors. And help communities and then whole systems of care. And in the end result, he said his journey has been one of endless trial and error. So that's what we came up with. So this is Dr. Jack Cochran, who has recently retired as, and you can correct me, Jack, on this, as the CEO for the medical portion of the Kaiser Permanente Foundation. And we had talked about some general conversations, but I'm going to let Jack step in and start his summary. That's all right.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you all. So my official title was Executive Director, which is the chief exec role for the Permanente Federation, which is the national organization of the Permanente medical groups. The Permanente medical groups are autonomous medical groups with their own governance in each individual state and region, but then they come together at a national level for collaboration and for learning and various things. And so I was the leader of the national program, and that was my job for the last 8 years. Prior to that, I led the Colorado region for 10 years, and that's where some of the learnings from this book came out. And frankly, I wasn't ever going to write a book, and as a matter of fact, somebody said you ought to try, and I tried, and I just was miserably unable to do it. And then finally somebody said, I know somebody who can help you. So Charlie Kenny and I got together, and he helped me think through some of the things. And I think what's interesting is that one observation I would have is that I've now been in a pretty senior role for over 15 years, looking at healthcare from a systems point of view, from a corporate point of view, from a strategic point of view, et cetera. And I haven't gotten burned out or bitter or given up on a lot of the fundamentals, mostly physicians. And I am a really big physician proponent. And I say that not that I wrote this or believe that we should go out and do nothing but protect doctors, but as you've seen in my writing, I talk about preservation and enhancement of careers. And so I believe in physicians, and yet I also have seen where physicians being checked out and cynical and angry can really, really undermine and stop progress from going forward. And I get it. I understand what's happened. And what has happened, in my observation, is all of us, sometime around the age of 20, give or take, were just immersed in idealism. And we were asked to write a couple of paragraphs for an application to some medical school, and we really waxed eloquent in our beliefs and our hopes and our desire to be healers and that sort of thing. And every one of those thoughts and emotions, in my view, was absolutely sincere. It was honest. It was true, and it was heartfelt. And then we got to be 35 and 40 and 45 and 50 and 55, et cetera. And for some, and frankly for too many, other emotions started to take over: disappointment, disillusionment, anger, frustration, etc. And I started to think, as I was in practice, why was that? And then Kaiser, Colorado decided they had problems, and they were going to hire outside consultants to come in and fix everything. And that's when I kind of perked up my ears, because I was one of those, you know these people, I was an unofficial leader. In other words, I was pretty well respected as a doc. I had a balanced point of view. I wasn't a rebel, but I had an opinion, and it typically was pretty values clear. People knew what my values were and knew where the patients stood. So I had some street cred, and as these consultants came in, I watched them flail because I call it the alchemy of the consultant. They come in with a head full of ideas and analytics and great, charts and all this stuff. And they run into an organization that doesn't necessarily know where it needs to go and doesn't have the leadership to get it there. And so the churn and the turmoil was amazing. And I said, I think this place needs to get back to basics and to get physicians to be leaders. So the evolution of my thinking is that where healthcare goes its best is where docs are involved actively in leadership, not necessarily outside of the clinical space, but at various levels. So I'm a big proponent of physician leadership, big proponent of physicians and physicians as key components of the healthcare system, and not, again, to protect doctors, but to try to keep us from being victims when patients need us in so many ways. And that's where I came up with the observation. The patients, we thought that the deal was make really good grades in your undergrad and you'll get into a good school. Make really good grades in medical school and you'll finish. Work really hard day and night in medical school and residency, pass your boards, work endless hours, work hard building a practice, and that was your contribution, and in exchange for that you would have a great life as a clinician. And unfortunately, we had our heads down, and we were working on that so hard that a lot of things went on around us, some of which was under our control, some of which wasn't. And then all of a sudden the healthcare system started putting in lots of external controls, and we were, by this time, stuck. And so managed care was a great term. It really was manipulation of doctors and patients around judgment and money, and it wasn't managing care at all. But it really started the turmoil in my head and my brain. So Colorado went through this insurgence of consultants, and we started losing money, losing members, and we lost 20% of our primary care docs, and we lost the best ones. We were losing the better ones, and I really saw it then. I thought, oh my gosh, do people really realize what primary care means? And my conclusion was, I'm not sure that they do. And so here's what I've thought through, and this is where this book sort of came from. healthcare is done amazing things, and we've done cures, advances, and miracles. But guess what? The average family, and that's why I love the fact that you are family practice and family medicine. The average family in this country is having a pretty rocky experience with the healthcare system, and whether it's uneven results, uneven access, or affordability, and they're not necessarily doing anything to deserve that. It's just how the system impacts them. And so what I saw happening was healthcare was getting, the American dream and the American family dream has been really rocked by the impact of healthcare on the family and on the economy, et cetera. And I think we and physicians are the answer, and I think primary care, family medicine is the key standard bearer to make this work. And I told Larry, I said, I say this a little easier now that I don't have to represent 47 specialties and love them all equally, because if you're a head of a doctor organization, you're supposed to sort of be, love them all. But I'm just talking about when medicine started to get more complex, and this was probably during my internship, residency, medical school, there was, a couple of journals, and then there was 10 journals, and then there was 20 journals, and there's blogs, and there's patient websites, and the exponential growth of complexity of knowledge, information, technology, etc., drove medical science into more subspecialization and sub-subspecialization. We now have cardiologists who specialize in the Purkinje fiber, and we have cardiologists who specialize in valves, and so that complexity drove a lot more medical science into subspecialization, including the medical schools. When I went to the University of Colorado Medical School, family practice was not a big part of anything. It was an elective, and that just seemed funny to me, because I know what all of us believed when we were little kids. The doctor was the family doctor. Unless we came from a family of ophthalmologists or dermatologists or orthopedists, our view, our image, our vision was the family doctor. And so at medical school, I didn't see that. So this first wave of complexity had two problems. Number one, it drove more subspecialization, but it missed the second wave of complexity, which is, guess what? People with bad hearts often have bad kidneys and bad lungs and are depressed. And you can't take a team of subspecialists after subspecialists after subspecialists trying to work through a chart or through faxes or even through an electronic record and provide patient-centered coordinated care. That requires primary care. That requires the second wave of complexity, which is patients surviving with multiple diseases, patients with multiple diseases. This is where we have to position, assert, and demand that primary care, family medicine, be at the center with the patient, because that's where the second wave of complexity fails, by just making it a specialty, subspecialty type of philosophy. People understand that intellectually. It's being proven around the world. You guys know there's a tremendous literature that the better and the more developed primary care is in the country, the better the results are, the better the economics are. Policymakers are slowly trying to get to it. Policymakers are heavily influenced by lobbyists and by all kinds of organizations. And so I do not predict or believe that your path is simple or straightforward. But in the middle of these two bookends of complexity is the doctor. And doctors, if you read the surveys, are not so happy. And here are people who are handling the most important things in people's lives. They have treasured capabilities, and they're kind of angry. Go ahead.
So so we had talked about this, and I said that with that kind of philosophy, Jack is already invited into our group because he's preaching to the choir on where family medicine can play this role. I think something else we talked about yesterday was, how do we take what he's learned and what he's written about and bring it into, how do we develop the reluctant leader? Because so many family docs are great in the clinical space and don't see their role as moving beyond that.
So just a comment. First of all, I do understand my audience. I do understand that there are potential ways to either ingratiate oneself or alienate oneself. I do understand that. But this is not a customized message that says, I'm going to say something very different if I talk to a group of cardiologists tomorrow. The message to cardiology will be very different in terms of me trying to say, let's reboot cardiology in the future to be more a member of a team that has a patient and a primary care doc in the center. When we went to micro diagnostic breakdowns of people, I use this expression, we made specialty care to primary. We said, boy, if you got trouble with the heart, you better go to the cardiologist for everything. Not a good idea. And now we need to make primary care more special because we need to say we have to be in the center. What I told Amy yesterday was, I understand that I've spoken to groups of orthopods and general surgeons, and there are characteristics of people that are oversimplifications, but in general, the family docs that I know are generally very patient-focused, mostly pretty modest people, not out there trying to make a big ruffle of anything, but to get the job done and to get it done well. And I said, I think we have to take a look at two things. Number one is improving our vocabulary, and number two, raising our standards. Not just to say, we love FB, we love what you guys do, and you guys are important, but to say, this is still truly about the patient. And if family practice doesn't become more dominant, more central, more rewarded, then the patient's going to get the raw deal. So if one of our colleagues is feeling a little meek or a little modest, this is not just about the profession. This is about what patients need, and I think that's kind of important. I had a faculty member in D.C. last year give me the compensation is this and this is this, and I said, I know all of that, and if I had a magic wand, we could change some of this stuff. But actually, it is being changed slowly, incrementally in many places. So we have to do two things. We have to improve our vocabulary and raise our standards. And by improving our vocabulary, let's stop saying we're going to make family medicine sustainable. To me, you've already given up. You've said to a 27-year-old, okay, you're bright, you're well-trained, you're one of our superstars. I hope the next 40 years is sustainable. It's just bad language. I hope the next 40 years is satisfying and relevant and interesting and gratifying. So let's improve our vocabulary. Let's stop making careers sustainable. And the second one, which is to raise the bar. I think that there are people in family medicine who talk very eloquently about the need for centralized coordination of care around the patient and with teams. And I talked to some of your leaders at AAFP recently, and I'm going to talk to them again. They said, what are the landmines we could fall into? And I said, well, I don't think you should get into a spitting contest with your primary care brethren. In other words, I would spend too much time trying to climb above peds or internal medicine or something like that. In fact, I think you have such a good story to tell, and you're unencumbered. And one of the things that the internists have is they've got half of their brothers and sisters are subspecialists. And so, they're already in the middle of that. I think that family medicine has a great position and a great story to tell. And I think it has to come from you, it has to come from patients, it has to come from payers. And I think you are accumulating the proof and you are accumulating the understanding. And frankly, because the physician career means so much to me, I've been really drawn to people like Tom Bodenheimer and Christine Sinsky and others who are writing about, practice really, how do you make that practice that's really, really gratifying and really good, and there's joy in practice and all that. And I listen to Paul Grundy and anybody I can listen to. And I think that I look upon the physician career as an asset that has been generally ignored beyond residency program. We do certification and recertification. But a career is not just academic prowess. It's how's your heart, how's your soul, how's it going? And I don't look upon the physician career from either of the two extremes. One extreme is, get over it. You guys have good jobs, you're paid well, you're respected by society, get over it. I don't buy that. And I don't buy the poor things, it's just awful what's happening to those doctors. I say, let's say, what is the science? Let's actually look at careers with a cold eye and say, what does it take to bring more gratification, more satisfaction, so that we don't just put in an electronic health record in somebody's office and destroy their productivity. How do we find ways to say this career, and it applies to nurses, it applies to pharmacists. I just happen to think that I've only got so much energy, and the physician has such disproportionate impact, up or down, on how things go, that I think the physician in our careers needs to be important to make them great, to make them gratifying, to make them really, relevant, so that we will be accountable and we will take on the issues of patients. Because when patients are out of the system physically, socially, psychologically, financially, we can't just say, I'm sorry, our beat is the exam room, our beat is the operating room, ours is the emergency room. We should care. I don't want to turn everything over to health insurance companies and hospital administrators, even though there are some good ones, without at least us having, a seat at the table and a voice in the game. Because I think, I've been a chief executive and I've sat with insurance company executives, and some of them are really good people, but many of them just don't quite understand what it's like to be a patient. The role of patient is involuntary. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, it's been a while. I think I might want to try that again. That was so fun the last
gratifying.
time. I mean, I would say the role of patient is involuntary, and it's often instantaneous. I didn't know yesterday that I was going to have a stroke today, that sort of thing.
Right.
Anyway.
So, does anyone else want to jump in at this point? Okay.
Now, come on.
So,
people are awake.
I know.
I know most of you on the East Coast. And, by the way, I am tremendously grateful that I know it's the East Coast, and thank you very much for arranging this now. So, very civilized hour for me.
Well, Jack, I have two questions. One is, you referred frequently to the history of when you graduated from medical school. What year was that?
When I went to medical school?
What year did you graduate from medical school? 73, okay. So you were, I did it a little later than that, so that helped me understand where you and I are coming from. I was 6 years later.
Yeah.
And my other question is, what did you think about Amy's question about how do you develop the reluctant leader?
Well, I think that that's what I am trying to devote my energy to these days. I no longer have to do the business side. I want to do the leadership side. Well, first of all, you have to have good modeling. You have to be able to say, look at that. That is what a position leader looks like, does, behaves like, etc. And it's not a bully or a big, smooth, charismatic snake oil salesman. This is an authentic physician who is grounded in the clinical values and their clinical realities, who's a good listener, and who really has the ability to say, you know what my values are, you know where I stand, and my communication is going to be consistent over time. I told Amy, I'll pull this out for you. I have a slide that says leadership in one slide, and the other one says leadership in one paragraph. It's out of the book, but it's so true. And part of it is if you're a hospital administrator or if you're a health insurance. Some of them actually believe doctors are ill motivated and up to no good and need to be manipulated or controlled or whatever. And if you believe that, the physicians are fundamentally going to gravitate toward doing the wrong thing or being fully self-centered. But enough about my surgical specialist friend. If you think that, if you really think that, then you're going to approach them trying to fool them, manipulate them, bully them, lie to them, something like that. If on the other hand you believe they're actually out to do the right thing, then you're going to try to engage them. And the problem with that is it's not fast. Engaging physicians is something that happens over time by building trust, by listening, by that sort of thing. And then by acting, showing that you did listen. I would say that the 4 steps are listen, acknowledge, this is what I heard you say, is that right? I'm listening to you, I'm acknowledging what you said. Challenge, here's what I think, here's what I'm learning. How does my data fit with your data? Are they compatible? Do they add to each other? And then what's our next conclusion together? And then do it again. Listen, acknowledge, challenge, repeat. So that's leadership in one slide. Here's leadership in one paragraph. And I told Amy, I said, first of all, thank you for reading the book. I don't make any money off the book, but it's nice to know that if you do as much work as we did to write it, that it has some positive impact on people. But don't read it 12 times. I just have to demand, please don't read it 12 times. Why do I say that? Because I have. And I told Amy, I said, the second or third time I thought, why do I keep finding mistakes? Why do I keep rewriting? Why do I keep doing this? And then by the 10th time, my co-author says, eventually you got to quit. We'll never be done. We just have to be finished. So this is from page 102. Leadership in one paragraph. Leadership may appear logical and straightforward, focused intensively on the right priorities, and things will just click into place. But I found that leadership had all the unpredictability and complexity of a Rubik's Cube in the hands of a novice. To me, connecting dots was a logical and rational exercise, but it was quite different from managing the daily reality of highly complex and highly skilled, independent human beings. My central lesson about leadership that emerged over time was that the challenge of leading competent individual souls is not about logic or compulsion. It's about listening, respect, relentless adherence to values, and sticking to that approach every day, an approach that goes a long way toward repairing a wounded culture. So that's my, if you can't read the whole book, read one paragraph on page 102. But that's true. I mean, my co-author said, as he went back and interviewed many, many people in Colorado and other places, they said, no, it's interesting because you come off as kind of quick-spoken and fairly good talker, but they said your differentiating trait that they all recognize is listening.
So that might be an interesting way to pull that person, like yourself, who never thought that there'd be another role for you in healthcare, and kind of equate those great clinical skills, which is listening and integrating information, and seeing if we can somehow interest them and model that care to take to the next level. I also was intrigued by how you say we do a lot of work modeling for medical students and residents, and then when people graduate and are out in the world, it's kind of figure it out by yourself.
Yeah, we do that. I think that medical education and medical training is so focused on near perfection of knowledge and application of skills, and it doesn't miss the humanity, but it certainly doesn't necessarily put it up front and reward it. Mm-hmm. And I often, often say to students, mostly surgery residents, when you go into a room on rounds, do two things. Number one, don't hold on to the doorknob. And number two, don't ever tell the person in the bed what a bad night you've had. Don't ever tell them how bad your night was. Because first of all, you may have lost some sleep. You may have had a bad diagnosis. You may have done some things wrong. But you're still standing upright with a white coat and a stethoscope, and they're sitting there with some illness they don't want. So don't try to win them over with how hard your night was. It's a waste of your time, and the voltage drop for you as a healer is amazing. And they kind of look at each other and go, yeah, we do that all the time. Well, we have a bad night. And patients become very codependent, right? Oh, I'm so sorry, you poor young doctor. You're healthy, 28 years old. You're going to go play soccer this afternoon, and I've just had a whipple. Well, you poor thing. But it's modeling. I told Amy, I said I gave the annual talk to the Washington State Society of Orthopedic Surgeons about 4 or 5 years ago, because the president of the society had heard me at IHI. He says, I want to give that talk. He says, I don't dare give that talk to these guys because I have to work with them. And it was about physicians being more accountable for all the needs of patients. And this is a group that says, listen, screw the insurance companies, screw the hospitals. We need better compensation. We're the orthopods. We need this and that. And he says, I want you to challenge them. And I said, okay. I said, give me a little air cover. But he said what was interesting is there was probably 150 people in the room. And he says, you split them into 3 groups. And he said, there was just such clarity. He says, about 10 minutes into your hour talk, a third of them, their jaw muscles started bruxing. They started twisting their pens. They started staring around. They were getting more and more agitated after about 10 minutes, and they got more agitated the whole hour. Another subset, after about 10 minutes, started taking notes, and by the end of your talk, they had taken about 4 or 5 pages of notes because they thought, shoot, maybe there is something here that we can't just whine and demand our fair share forever. And I said, what was the third group? He says the third group were the ones who were trying to figure out which group they were part of. So, I mean, I don't think one makes big change by getting a majority to all of a sudden have an epiphany. It's a matter of what's the hard, it may be you folks, you may be the people, the FMEC, maybe you're the Margaret Mead army that's going to have to change this. But all I know about leadership, I told Amy, is there is, of all the traits that are important for leadership, I think one is just being relentless. I tell leaders in training, I said, don't love the word no, but get to understand the word no, because the word no represents somebody else's opinion. And I have been told no thousands of times as I've tried to make change and lead things and that sort of thing. And I said, no is a response from people that say, I don't want to talk about this much more. I just don't want to do it. And I said, don't love the word, but just understand what it means. It's from Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. He talks about the Stockdale paradox. Admiral Stockdale, who talked about who survived the Hanoi Hilton, who were the guys that survived, and he said they had two traits. Number one, they had this brutal sense of honesty of what reality was like. There was no sugarcoating how bad things were, because then they could link that to an untouchable resolve that whatever it takes, we're getting out of here. And he said in context, one of the groups that had the hardest time and didn't make it was the optimists, because their optimism was based on, I'm just sure things are going to be better by summer. And then things weren't better by summer. Well, I think we'll be out by Christmas. And then they weren't. And they progressively kind of broke their own spirits. So, I don't think this is a prisoner of war situation in primary care, but I think you're lucky you got the name family in your specialty, because I think the American family and the American family dream has got a lot of challenges. And what we've seen with the Affordable Care Act, whatever the politics that people believe about the Affordable Care Act, is you see people who try, and this is with or without subsidies, people who try to get some coverage, they go to higher and higher cost sharing. They go to more and more deductible. And that's not because, they want to pay a lot of cash out of pocket. They're making a family bet. And the wager is we won't get sick, we'll have this lower premium, and we'll have a safety net. And then when they get sick, and it's that out-of-pocket range, they ration health care at the kitchen table. They ration health care when the family says, you need to get an MRI. Unbelievably, it's $500, and it's the same month that we need a new refrigerator. You need to get, the child needs to get their tonsils out the same month we need a new clutch on the truck. And if we don't know those realities, everybody on our life team knows the realities. The people help us with our cars, help us with our hair, help us with our clothes. It's either us or our family or one generation, one touch away from us that people are rationing healthcare at the kitchen table. And so we've got all these excellent results that we can brag about, and I use two quotes often, and one is excellent good enough. Excellent results at a macro and scientific level are wonderful and miraculous. But if people can't afford it, or they make tough decisions, or they go broke, then it's really tough. And then I get people saying, screw you, Cochran. This is not about the doctors. The doctors are doing their job. They're working hard. They're working late. They're doing their job. This is about the pharmaceutical companies. And this is about the specialists. And this is about the hospitals. This is about the insurance companies. And those are all true. Everybody's got, nobody's scot-free. But if we say we're going to be victims and we're going to keep our head in the foxhole until everything else is fixed, then we'll have the last 25 years again. We have got to get our heads up and say, what can we do? What can we do individually and collectively? I told Amy, I said, in having this national job, I did get a fair amount of time flying back and forth to Washington, D.C., et cetera. And I said, I tell you what's interesting is, as a general citizen, I never thought about this much, but you go to Washington, D.C., and you meet with senators, and I would tell you the first time I went in 2007, I met a group of 12 senators that were both parties, and they were dedicated to working together. And I mean, I thought, this is cool. You know, this was Wyden and Bennett. You know, Ron Wyden, liberal from Oregon, and Bob Bennett, conservative from Utah, and they're working together. And then something happened, and Bennett couldn't get reelected because Republicans didn't want any part of him because he was too moderate, and all of a sudden things fell apart. So the Senate is made up of people with heavy constituency thinking and the need to get reelected every 6 years or every 2 years for the House. But the other group that I got to know that was the governors. And the governors actually, if you spend time with them, whatever their politics are, when there's a break in the hallway, you can tell they're a bunch of chief executives. You know, they may not like each other's politics a little bit, but they still got a balanced budget. They still got to build roads. They still have to take money from roads and spend it on health care or not. And so they are so much more practical than the Senate and Congress people. So that's pretty interesting. That you can see ideologies come out as being very conflicted, but when they talk to each other, they have a common language, which is, it's hard running this organization because we don't have enough money. And healthcare, you know, so they have a different view of healthcare. I think sometimes the Senate and Congress people get a little on their high horse because they don't have to look in the mirror as much. Anyway, that was a real distraction. Sorry about that.
This is Larry Bauer. The group of people who's on the call are educational leaders in different settings. And I want to challenge the group a little bit to think, you know, as Jack was talking earlier about the focus of most medical education, and I think that's true for most health professional education, it focuses on the knowledge, the technical stuff. And this leadership development, I'm wondering, I'd like to challenge the group to think a little bit about students, residents, recent graduates. How do we help the leadership skills to develop? Any thoughts about that?
You know, I'll pipe in a little bit on this, Larry. This is Hershey Bell, and
by the way,
Jack,
thank you for introducing yourself.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an odd duck, Jack. I like to tell people that my life is one of being a complete misfit. I'm a Canadian family physician who is currently the dean of a school of pharmacy at an osteopathic medical school in the United States. And there's probably a novel to write in that. But
I'd say you're probably pretty agile.
Well, it is funny. I related a lot to your initial comments, Jack, about the introduction of you and how you got to where you are and how you remained open to possibilities.
Trial and error.
That resonates a lot with me. So, but the last 7 years, I've been in a very different perch. As the dean of a pharmacy school, I'm looking at healthcare as a family physician who advocates now for really the common ground for me is the patient. And I realized very quickly in pharmacy, and this question about leaders and where are leaders coming from and how do we train them, the thing that's very different about pharmacy education than medical education is built into the curriculum in the early years of education in pharmacy are courses on advocacy, leadership, communication, not necessarily the way we think about it in medicine, but in terms of how you use communication to further messages that are important to whatever constituency you care about. And I've been very impressed with how many of my students get involved in leadership. When we have our day on the Hill in Harrisburg and students, we send 100 students to that thing, and I'm always sort of sitting back, and we have a medical school at LECOM as well, and of course I've been in medicine for years, and it strikes me that if you look at a medical student and their focus, and you sort of hit on this, it's so focused on the wonder of medicine and all that medicine can be and that. But yet in pharmacy, although they're learning the wonder of pharmacy and health sciences, there's this also incredible groundswell of, what do we need to do to change healthcare? What do we need to do to be better advocates for the highest quality healthcare? And I've been very much involved in interprofessional education because of just the nature of who I am and what I'm doing. But this idea of leadership, it seems to me that we there's something about and this really is what I got from your book actually, is that part of the reason I think physicians become disenfranchised or burn out or lose their ability to want to advocate and lead is that the things that really excite us about how healthcare should change and how we should get involved, they just aren't part of that early experience of our education. And by the time we're sort of in the middle of, how should healthcare change, it's 20 years down the road, and things flew by so fast, and now we're going, this isn't what I wanted it to be, but I'm so disenfranchised. And in pharmacy, again, the profession that I am closest to now, that fire is lit day one. I speak to my students in the first year on how to advocate, and as part of a course that I teach in, which is called Pharmacy Provided Care, where we talk about the pharmacist's role in the healthcare system. I'm teaching them day one how to get out there, advocate for the highest quality care, what it means to talk with your congressman, your senator, your local elected representatives, how you get your patients on the side of advocating for change in healthcare. And I guess I just didn't see that in medicine, and I'm not sure that it's still there even today. So just my reflections on maybe why leadership is maybe hard to come by in medicine. We aren't hardwiring it into the early experience of the medical student.
Well, I don't know what medical education has to say about leadership. I do know the places I've talked, people saying, yeah, we need to do more of that. We should do more of that. We should be more interested in that. So I don't know how that all fits together. I've been asked to be part of a development of a program out here at Stanford. But I do think that I've had a very unique experience with pharmacy, clinical pharmacy. For whatever reason, we had this wonderful clinical pharmacist at Colorado, and I think that because the pharmacist doesn't necessarily immediately assume the highest rung on the ladder, they realize that for them to realize the wonder of their science and their clinical skills, they've got to be pretty good at service. And service includes nurses, doctors, patients, everybody. So there's kind of a nice humility that says, I've got a lot to offer, but apparently I'm going to have to prove it. And I think that awareness, Dennis Helling was our chief of clinical pharmacy, and he turned out a generation of young kids that were just so service-focused and come alongside, that we had physicians who started off with the classic point of view, we don't need no pharmacists, they worked at Walgreens and that sort of thing, and then they got to know one or two and got to work alongside them, the clinical pharmacists, and then was like, oh my goodness. And then we had the anti-coag clinic, and then we had the cardiac rehab clinic. And slowly, it's the old early adopter, late adopter, laggard, the old Everett Rogers change. The early adopters started to say to their other colleagues, these pharmacists, they're really good. And by the way, if you're a general family medicine doc or a general internal medicine doc, how can you keep track of all those medications? That's why pharmacy is subspecialized now. And so once they got to know how valuable the pharmacists were, that's, I think, what made Colorado the best region. I used to think, I thought it was me, but I'm pretty sure it was not. I think it was the incredible humility of the medical group toward pharmacy and vice versa. There was just a genuine respect. So yeah, but leadership is, again, I think we're still dealing with I call it the ivy-covered, brick-walled, tenured institution called medical school. And they're geniuses, and they're tenured, and that sort of thing. But out here, I'm getting ready to move from San Francisco to Denver the next week, but I was in a meeting with some guys from Khan Academy we're talking. And Khan Academy started off like a Sylvan Learning Center. It's an online free training program for kids to teach them math and things like that in such innovative ways. And it's marvelous. I'm at this meeting, and they said, well, we're going to start doing medical school. I said, oh, shit, the bricks, the ivy-covered bricks are falling apart. What do you mean medical school? They said, well, if you go to the UC San Francisco first-year medical school classes, there's nobody in class. They learn biochemistry on the computers in their rooms while they're playing video games. They don't go. And he says the first year of medical school for sure should be free and it should be online. And I said, just that kind of thinking I like, because somebody's saying, why is the freshman year $40,000 and why is it this, why is it that, when these kids can learn it fast and do it learn. And he says, and so the first year of medical school we're going to do at Khan Academy and we're going to get the credit. And I thought, boy, how's that work in New Haven? How does that work in Denver? And how does that work in Cambridge and that sort of thing? But then the guy at UC Riverside says, we're going to make medical school free. And we're going to make medical school free for kids who come in from disadvantaged backgrounds, going to primary care, finish the residency and practice for 6 years. All medical schools forgiven. So we can't do that. Well, excuse me, we spend $3 trillion on healthcare? And we can't find some places to get free medical education? And the other myth is, well, we're going to go to these kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. We're not going to get the cream of the crop. Sorry, newsflash about the cream. If there are 20,000 kids in this country that go to medical school every year, there are 300,000 kids that are equal to them that could go to medical school. This is not the 20,000 are so freaking elite and so smart that nobody else could possibly do what they're doing. Sorry about those of us in the profession. There's not just 20,000 of us every year. There's hundreds of thousands. And by the way, some of us get dumber as we get older. Some of us don't read as well as we get older. Some of us don't keep up. So I think that there's a lot of things that are going to rock the house of medicine a little bit. I remember it was a few years ago that Harvard didn't have a family practice program, and some guy gave him $30 million to establish one. And
they just started a residency this July's time, an actual residency program. So they just did that now.
But to me, it's what I want family medicine to be. So I wrote about doctor. I'm going to run you guys over, but it's okay. I'm not working by the hour here. The doctor crisis 1.0 was burnout, right? It's like, how do we deal with burnout when we need the soul restored of the doctor so that she will come back to the office and not be sustainably there for the day, but have great opportunities. And so we're going to have to teach how about teams and how to use data and how to use informatics and analytics and all that stuff. And that second doctor crisis is brain drain versus brain gain. I just wrote a piece on this. And that is this medical student, this surgery resident from Stanford comes up and meets me in my office. He says, guy from the business school told me about your book and I read it last week twice. I said, twice? He says, I'm on call for orthopedics every 3 nights. I read it every night. I read it twice. And he says, here's what scares me. I did my undergrad at Stanford in engineering. And there's 3 pathways for Stanford engineer undergrad. A third of them, roughly, go into engineering. They wanted to be engineers. They always did. They're happy for the rest of their lives. A third of them go into medicine. They think it's a good discipline and training for medical education. They go into medicine. And he says, I think we're the least happy of the 3. And I said, what's the third group? He says, the third group is going into the tech startup world. And they're sitting in the coffee shops in downtown Palo Alto and writing code and doing this and, going to do the next Uber or whatever. And he says, I worry about my profession that we're going to lose all the cool guys who are going to go into that and not into, he says, well, I see my surgery residents, they're hanky and angry and cranky. And I said, well, what we have to do in the future is, for one thing, those guys that are brain drained, a lot of them went to medical school and dropped out, et cetera. They're working in places like Silicon Valley doing tech startups. They still have great reverence for doctors, nurses, patients, and the issues. They just didn't have the patience to put up with medical education. So they're doing diabetes, this, and I said, what we have to do is we have to look at our future to take brain drain and frame it and make it brain gain, where we actually change the medical education process to make it more cool, so that some of this tech stuff is not outside the walls of medicine, and we find ways to bring it into medical education. And people are pretty tuned into that. And I said the reason it was important for me to retire from Kaiser now is that this is something I think is important that I want to work on for the next 3 or 4 years. And I thought, because I'm old, God, I don't need to do much of this stuff, but I still got this burr under my saddle that the medical leadership, the physician leadership, especially primary care, has got a chance to really make healthcare much better for patients. And I said to myself, if I want to spend 3 or 4 years trying to transform the profession and the careers of physicians, am I going to do that in a highly structured organization at a senior management level, or am I going to do it by leaving and doing something with some other likely volunteers, organizations that say, no, we're more in that space. So I'm on sabbatical right now. It's a personal sabbatical. It's just taking some time off, and I'm just loving it. But as you can tell, I can't get the bit out of my mouth. So I'm still charging on this. And I think
Larry, this is Larry again. Could you in your book, you talked a bit about learning circles. Could you make a comment? Because I think that may be a vehicle that allow you to do what you're interested in, and also to draw others into this web of thinking.
I think that because of this complexity and because of the American family dream being kind of shattered, we need to get better faster. And I don't think we're going to treat our way out of this 18% GDP with variable outcomes. I don't think we're going to legislate our way out. We're going to have to learn our way out. And for me, the concept is we live in a world of open source learning. People are connected. People are learning all over the world. Healthcare needs to become more of a learning industry. And the Learning Coalition is guys like you. You guys are a learning coalition. How do you take what you do, make sure you are learning, sharing with each other, and then confront the AFP and confront the AMA and confront the internists and that sort of thing? It's sort of a concept. It's not an organization with bylaws and T-shirts. It's the notion of how do we just commit to be a more open source learning industry. I had this challenge in trying to make change at a national level at Kaiser. I said, Kaiser has this great thing. We do the best care anywhere, but not everywhere. We got places where we're the best in the nation at this, best in the nation at that. Well, why aren't we that way everywhere? Well, because we're our head down. We're not sharing our own data internally. We're not learning and testing stuff from each other. And over the last 8 years, if you take some of the measures like NCQA, Medicare scores, we went from having 1 or 2 groups in the top 10 to having every one of them in the top 10. And it wasn't because we got smarter. It's because we took our data, we took our information, we took the transparency commitment, and we learned much faster from each other. That's the kind of things. I think that's where family practice can take a very high stand. I said, you guys should plant a flag for the American family, and I think part of that is, healthcare is a learning industry, and family practice is going to be the hub. Anyway, I'm just, as Larry learned the other night, I'm just full of ideas, and I'm not full of crap, but I don't have everything worked out, but I'm relentless in terms of trying to find people that will accept challenges with me and to try to work on something.
I think he's in the right circle now, which is kind of cool. So,
yeah.
Any other thoughts from other participants? It's a quiet group tonight. Is it the rain?
Really?
The most rain?
Well, it is 8 o'clock.
Hi, this is Stacy. I'm sorry that it's feeling like such a quiet group, Amy. It's a great discussion, and Jack, I really am impressed with everything you have to say, and of course your book. And I'm working very hard on these ideas of how we train our physician leaders, and sort of my passion about this has brought sort of our residency to a different place. And I have been program director at our residency at UMass for 7 years, and at the beginning of that, one of the processes we went through was to write a new mission statement, and it was a difficult process to get to a point where in the mission statement it is about training physician leaders instead of just clinically competent physicians. And at that point in our residency, the leadership of my department felt that that was a huge stretch to make that commitment. And we, now have a longitudinal leader curriculum that works through the IHI triple aim, and with the addition of and wellness piece to that curriculum, thinking, as your book highlights so well, how important wellness is to physicians being able to lead in this environment. And so I was very happy when Bodenheimer's article came out calling that the quadruple aim, because it fits very well with what we're doing.
I love that.
And so my And sort of the other side of it, more nationally, I work on the AAFP's Chief Resident Leadership Development Program. And so we get to work with the chief residents from across the country on building these leadership skills. And what I still struggle with is really identifying what are the key elements that they need to walk out the door with. And I think you highlighted something earlier in your discussion about modeling and showing them leaders, and I think that's how I got, why I'm here at UMass and why I got interested in this, is that I think that was a huge impact on me, just seeing family physician leaders throughout our institution. But I think there's a generation, I think, even of the folks that I know who are family medicine physician leaders who still have that language issue of apologizing for being a family doc instead of celebrating being a family doc and what we can bring to this situation. So I'm interested in if you have any ideas of, other ideas of what I need to add to this curriculum, what I need to be doing both at our national leadership development for chief residents and also in my own programs to develop these skills. What are the key things that these young physicians need to walk out the door with and be ready and prepared for?
Yeah, I think that what I tried to do when I was in the region was to do tiers of leadership. And so we had a basic thing called Introduction to Management. It was just a few days. I think was it 3 days, twice a year, but it was basically context building, fundamental around the business of medicine. And so it was a little bit tactical around management. But we also mixed in things like emotional intelligence, critical conversations, things like that to try to help people be members of teams. But then when we took people from that basic, that was sort of an orientation course. Then the main course, the next course, was heavily about personal development as a leader, communicator, that sort of thing. I always say that if there is, as you know, I'm a plastic surgeon, so I like pictures and little things and not a lot of detail. I could never write a book with a lot of facts in it, but one of the things I say is if I put leadership on a 3x5 card, there would be three things. One would say, number one, manage yourself. I see so many voltage drops where people are disingenuous or mean or really don't manage their own sensibilities and their own well-being in a group setting or with a patient or with patients. So manage yourself is number one, which is about EQ and the kinds of things. Some of us have them, some of us develop them, et cetera. Second one is develop great leaders and teams. This is about